Welcome to this explainer. I am so thrilled to have you here today. If you're someone who loves learning and, kind of bringing a sense of order to the world, you are in for an absolute treat. Today, we're going to look at history, and we're going to completely shatter how you compartmentalize historical eras. We're taking that mental timeline you've been relying on since grade school, tearing it right up and rebuilding it using some truly mind-bending historical overlaps. Let me ask you a question. When you picture history, do you neatly organize it into these distinct, tidy little boxes? The ancient world over here on the left, the medieval era right in the middle, and the modern age safely tucked away on the right. It feels logical, doesn't it? But what if I told you those boxes are actually overlapping in some shockingly weird ways? The truth is, our internal timeline is fundamentally broken. History is a lot messier and, frankly, much more fascinating than we ever realized.
Okay, let's dive into this. To understand why these overlapping events feel so incredibly weird, we really need to talk about cognitive dissonance. This is basically the mental friction that happens when our deeply held beliefs, in this case our chronological mental timelines, clash with reality. It's like a mental short circuit, when two things that belong in completely different eras actually exist at the exact same time. Our brains just kind of freeze up. Let's look at exactly what I mean.
Section 1. Ancient Worlds Colliding, a Clash of Timelines. Our first stop is the ancient world. When we compare what was happening in two very different parts of the globe at the exact same time, the sheer vastness of this era really comes into focus. Get this, while the ancient Egyptians were at the absolute height of their architectural prowess, engineering and building the Grand Pyramid of Djoser between 2630 and 2611 BC, isolated populations of woolly mammoths were still alive and kicking. Yeah, you heard that right. Giant Ice Age megafauna were still roaming on Wrangel Island, right off the coast of eastern Russia, all the way until 1650 BC. Humanity was literally building one of the most incredible structural wonders of the world, while mammoths still walked the earth.
Moving forward, let's look at the massive, almost unbelievable overlap between medieval Europe and the Americas. If you were to guess which is older, the sprawling Aztec Empire or European university life, you'd probably guess the Aztecs, right? Most of us would. But the University of Bologna in Italy was already well established and teaching law to students in 1088. To put that into perspective, that is hundreds of years before the city-states of Tenochtitlan, Texcoco, and Tlacopan allied to officially form the Aztec Empire in 1428. There were literally European college students stressing over exams before the Aztec Empire even existed.
Section 2. The Strange 19th Century. A Bizarre Melting Pot. Think about George Washington for a second. He died peacefully at his home on December 14, 1799, at the age of 67. Here's a guy who led armies, formed a brand new nation, and basically shaped modern democracy. But he died completely unaware that dinosaurs ever existed. No way, right? But it's true. Why? Because the very first dinosaur fossil, the Megalosaurus, wasn't scientifically described and recognized by British naturalist William Buckland until 1824. The father of the United States never once knew that a T-Rex or Stegosaurus ever walked the earth.
Now, what's really interesting about this is one specific year. I want you to burn this year into your mind, 1889, because it might just be the most jam-packed, contradictory year in all of recorded human history. Let's see what the whole shebang looked like globally at this exact moment.
In 1889, on the art and culture side of things, the iconic Eiffel Tower was officially inaugurated in Paris for the World's Fair. That very same year, Vincent van Gogh was painting his breathtaking masterpiece, Starry Night. Meanwhile, over in Japan, a company called Nintendo was founded to manufacture Hanafuda playing cards. Yes, that Nintendo. And at the precise moment that Nintendo was launching and Van Gogh was painting, the infamous serial killer Jack the Ripper was actively terrorizing the streets of London, leaving behind his Bustoph Pynchon Street victim. All of this in the exact same year.
Also happening in 1889, we have a profound historical coincidence regarding two of the 20th century's most recognizable, yet completely diametrically opposed figures. The iconic British comedian and silent film star Charlie Chaplin and the fascist dictator Adolf Hitler were both born in the exact same year. This staggering parallel of timelines certainly wasn't lost on Chaplin, who famously utilized this coincidence of age and appearance when he parodied the dictator in his 1940 satirical film, The Great Dictator.
And the 19th century has one more absolutely jarring contrast for us.
If you lived in London, you could buy a ticket and ride the very first operational line of the London Underground, starting on January 10, 1863. You were literally participating in the dawn of modern public transit. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the brutally bloody American Civil War was still raging. It wouldn't legally come to a close with the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery until December 1865. Think about that. Commuters were riding the subway while the Civil War was still being fought.
Section 3. Modern pop culture clashes. Pop culture versus history.
Picture this. It's May 25th, 1977. U.S. audiences are sitting in dark theaters, absolutely dazzled by the futuristic, groundbreaking sci-fi world of Star Wars. But while Luke Skywalker was busy destroying the Death Star, across the ocean in France, a man named Hamida Jandoubi was executed. His method of execution? The guillotine. The final use of the medieval device made famous during the French Revolution occurred simultaneously with the release of Star Wars. It's just wild to think about.
Let's look at another anchor year, 1940. This year hosts one of the most profound and stark historical overlaps of the 20th century, bringing two entirely different worlds into the exact same week.
The historical record presents us with a deeply sobering timeline here. On May 15, 1940, the very first McDonald's restaurant opened its doors, laying the groundwork for what would become an enduring symbol of American post-war convenience and culture. A mere 5 days later, on May 20, 1940, the first prisoners arrived at the Auschwitz concentration camp in Poland. Two events, representing vastly different spectrums of the human experience, unfolding at almost the exact same moment in time.
So the crucial point is how these overlaps bridge gaps in our cultural evolution. Take Pablo Picasso, an artist whose work feels firmly rooted in the classical and early modern art movements of the early 20th century. Well, Picasso lived a very long life, passing away in 1973. That is the exact same year the legendary rock band Pink Floyd released their monumental 45 million copy selling album, The Dark Side of the Moon. The end of an absolute titan of classical modern art directly intersected with the pinnacle of modern psychedelic rock.
Here we see another direct handoff between eras. Charlie Chaplin, the face of the early silent film era, a time of black and white, physical comedy, and live piano accompaniment, passed away in his sleep at the age of 88 in Switzerland. The year was 1977. That very same year, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak officially incorporated Apple Computer Inc. We essentially stepped right out of the defining era of early cinema and directly into the dawn of the personal computing age, all within the span of a single calendar year. And this brilliantly illustrates just how rapidly our modern world was shaped. For a lot of us, the release of the Harry Potter books feels like a nostalgic, distant memory of our youth. But the final book in the series, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, was published in the summer of 2007. Why does that matter? Because that was the exact same summer Steve Jobs stood on a stage and released the very first original iPhone. The end of the biggest analog reading craze of a generation met the absolute beginning of the smartphone revolution that would change human interaction forever.
Section 4. Rethinking our timeline. History is a messy web.
We've covered a ton of ground today, jumping everywhere from pyramids to iPhones. So, what does this all mean? Well, it means history isn't a neat, linear progression. Actually, scratch that. It's more like a giant, messy, overlapping puzzle of events. Breaking down those tidy little mental boxes gives us a much truer understanding of human progress. And I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on. Based on everything we've looked at today, imagine the humans living 100 or 200 years from now. When they look back at our current decade, what bizarre, contrasting present-day events are going to induce cognitive dissonance for them? What two things are happening in the world right now that future students will absolutely refuse to believe happened at the same time? Keep challenging your timelines, keep asking those big questions, and never stop exploring. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.